social life. They had only been married for 6 years, and they owned a home together in Arlington Heights, a suburb of Chicago. Although they were both still working, they were planning on retiring at the end of the year and were looking forward to starting the next phase of their life. May the 15th, 1970 started out as a routine River.